All right. Good evening, everyone. This is the May 8th, 2025 meeting of the Annapolis Conservancy Board. I am your chair, Jack Turner. Going to call this meeting to order at 5:33 p.m. And we have a quorum, so we can get to business. I circulated the agenda a couple days ago, and I had the wrong date on there, so I updated. And actually, I think I still have I have May 7th. It's May 8th. So first order of business on our agenda this evening is approving the minutes from our last meeting. Dylan, thank you for recording those minutes. They are very thorough and really helpful looking back at, it's hard to lead a meeting and take notes. So that is just really helpful for me. If everyone has had a chance to review the minutes, I would like to get them approved. If we want to wait until next meeting, because I did just kind of recently circulate them, I think that's fine too. So maybe we could discuss if has everybody looked at the minutes yet?
I've reviewed the minutes.
Oh, thank you, Sally. You get an A plus.
Yep. And they look great. And I
Yeah.
appreciate the kind words that Dylan threw in there.
It takes, I mean, minutes, it takes effort to get those together.
Yeah, it's no joke.
So,
I say we approve them, Jack.
okay.
Go for it.
Okay, cool. Does someone want to make a motion to approve the minutes?
Motion to approve.
All right, do we have a second?
I'll second.
So Tom has seconded. So the motion is to approve the minutes of the March 13th, 2025 Annapolis Conservancy Board. All in favor?
I
Aye.
The motion passes unanimously. Thank you, team. All right, on to our duties and 2025 goals. I think some of this may sound a little bit regurgitated from our last meeting, because as usual, I like having lofty goals, although unfortunately don't always have the time to get everything checked off the to-do list. So under our first goal, we've got soliciting dedication of properties to the city. I'm not expecting everyone to have fully digested the the conservation map that I circulated in an email recently, but I'm going to pull that up again right now just so we can look at it for a minute as a group, if that's okay. Let's see, share this screen. So here, this wonderful map has our existing easements in this kind of darkish green color. And then we've got our potential easements kind of in the same color. I may see if we can change that color to make it a little easier to see. But, I thought this was going to be a really useful exercise for our board to be able to look at where different potential easements could come in. Since soliciting dedication of new properties to the city is one of our stated duties here. So I think I had mentioned this last time and just unfortunately didn't get around to really looking into it. But, having our board, each member take a look at this map, and maybe I can just take off the existing easements. So these are the potential easements, and looking at if anything popped out to anyone in particular. So, maybe take a couple minutes here, and if anyone has any initial thoughts or has had a chance to look at it, maybe discussing any of these potential new easements, or maybe there's another area that's not on here that someone thinks would make an easement. So if we have some points to discuss, I'm open to it. If we want to continue to move on and maybe set a deadline to get some feedback from everyone, that's fine too.
Jack, I had a question. I was reviewing the map and I was just curious, do any of these potential easements have a confirmed willing property owner yet, or are we too early in the process right now?
That's a great question. And really, that's kind of in some ways, that is like the question.
Okay.
From my understanding, I don't think that we've captured that information. There are, if we look at the table here, I think the table has where the source of, so the primary, I think this category here shows where they came from. So, previously, and I think this was even before my time, the Conservancy Board had done an exercise to say where could potential new easements come from. And so a lot of these on here were identified by our board. And Tom, you may be the only person if you're still here, Tom. Oh yeah, Tom, you may be the only person who has that institutional knowledge who's on the call right now, because I think all of the other board members, including myself, are newer.
Right.
But there were some other, there's open space, beautification, adjacent. So there were some other areas identified, connection to trails, connection to other plans. So this came about, these were all from 2020.
Right,
like
Jack.
That's kind of when it came online.
You're right. The initial thought was, okay, fine. Let's take a look at what we've got. Let's take a look at collectively what we would like to see, or at least kind of piggybacking on the bike trail concept, as far as having a continuous way to connect all the various green spaces, as we both literally and figuratively have them now, and to see, what would be feasible, what would be a potential target. We still have run into, a hard problem, and unfortunately still with the group, that we've got, and the fact that it's privately owned. At least the majority of them are privately owned. And what is the incentive on donating privately owned, material for either, a conservation easement or any other means of transfer to the city, in order to provide both maybe a green space and not necessarily, well, and a potential recreation area, or a green space, and or a conservation easement, and potentially a trail district that's already gone through, or just something that would give people an opportunity to start walking through and de facto create that kind of a linkage. And we found we had, there were a lot of things out there. However, we've got the lasting problem of, why would anybody want to be extremely magnanimous unless there was a threat to the property itself? For the most parts, it's easier to say, hi, as a homeowners community, we own it. We're just not going to let anybody else on it. Gee, isn't that wonderful? But that also is kind of like, not in my backyard. You can, yes, we've got a lot of green space. Right now, it all belongs to our community. So thank you very much, Annapolis. We'll just kind of keep meandering and keep it like it is. So it's, unless we've got a carrot and a stick approach, an old hackneyed saying of mine, but if you've got that, then there's some encouragement for people to talk. There's some encouragement for no building. I was driving along, what was it, 70 it's been a long time since I've driven 70. But as I was last driving over there, some of the overall farming area that had been owned by the companies had turned it over, and it became a solar farm. So there was a connection that, okay, they said we have a solar farm, which is aiding one group, and had another group, or that solar farm people were then being put in the driver's seat. Gee, we'd really like to have this. Look, it would be for the betterment of this and betterment of that. But at the same time, it's saving that farmer's property. So it would kind of be almost like the same thing if we took a look and there was another good reason to tie things together. Maybe we could have some firepower, because right now we can go and ask and look real pretty and, do all sorts of things, but it's still going to be a pushing the rock uphill, trying to convince people out of the goodness of their heart, gee, they'd really like to give away stuff that they already own anyway. There's
a couple points there. Thank you, Tom. That's helpful, insightful, like this background context. It is my understanding that most of the existing conservation easements in the city became that way due to development. So, there's a proposed development, and part of the concession of implementing the development was putting some area of land into conservation and having having the city hold that easement.
Right. That's been the latest after they kind of ran into the brick walls of trying to have everybody just, donate it. And
Right.
then it came in with, okay, fine. If we've got new development that's coming in, who has to sign off on it? Planning and zoning. Okay, well, while we do that, we should ensure that there is adequate space available and useful space available, and so that it's not just, the tree lawn, the sidewalk buffer that that companies are going to put into an easement. So
Mhm.
you're right. I mean, it's, this is still a glacially moving document, or a glacially moving concept, but there is, no real way that anybody has really stumbled on yet to light a huge fire. Again, without the possibility of, joining up either with some other committees or finding another champion who has a budget, who has a lot more firepower and promise of the city with the ability to make things happen. So
Yeah, and who would really be helpful also in this discussion is Linda, because with her background in land conservation, because I don't know the answers here, and Aaron, I'm not sure if you may have any insight, but is there not some sort of tax advantage, or I'm just thinking of what's a benefit for a property owner to put part of their land into conservation, besides being just paid outright by another entity like the city or someone else. What are are there other advantages that we could, communicate to a
Yeah.
landowner who's interested but wants to know kind of what's in it for them besides no development on this part of their property?
Yeah, they would get a tax write-off.
Right. So there's some incentive there. I don't know how, impactful that would be, but if you've got a landowner who's already kind of interested in saying, "Oh, I'd love to, put this land into conservation, but why?" I guess that's one why
right.
there.
No, I agree with you, Jack. But I mean, this is the, I don't want to say the first time, but it's the most emphatic that we've had an answer coming back from anybody that said, "Oh yes, definitely, there would be a cost savings, or something taken off their taxes if they want to do that, to make it a viable quid pro quo that they might be able to convince their homeowners association that it's worth voting on and worth giving it to the city."
Hmm.
So yeah, I mean, that'd be great, and especially if there's areas, like I said originally, connecting the various green areas that would be interested in creating first or obtaining first, but being able to do that and then have somebody work up what potentially a cost savings would be, then to take the next step to approach a homeowners association. But heretofore, at least from my memory, it did not materialize.
Right. Okay. All right. Thank you, Tom, and thanks,
Yes, sir.
Aaron. So the other, another quote unquote benefit that I could potentially think of, and as far as we could do in like a pitch to a property owner if we're interested, is, once the land goes in conservation and the city holds the easement, potentially, I don't think we have this infrastructure set up right now, but potentially there's some level of management and care that the city and our board would give to that easement. So if there's, like, for example, what we've done with the Save Our Trees group at a couple of city easements with removing invasive species and monitoring the easements and making sure that they're, staying in conservation and abiding by the restrictive covenants or whatever the mechanism is to put it in conservation. So, if somebody says, "Oh, I've got this patch of woods and it's really nice, but it's being taken over by ivy and I don't have time to take care of it." Well, if they put it in conservation, then maybe there's some sort of program or some sort of agreement where, a third party, this board or the city has some budget to maintain and manage those easements. So that could be another angle. I don't think we have that figured out at this point, but helping with management of the land.
Yeah, agreed. I think that again would be a decent enough carrot and stick to try to form a concept around, boy, this is what we'd really like to do. And, let's pick an area that we'd like to be able to, put a full court press on and see whether or not that would be viable or, agreeable either to an association or to an individual owner.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Tom.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So any other, yeah, this is really, I mean, if you go in, so if you open up the map, which I linked in the email recently, and you show the table, I don't think there's a ton of data here necessarily, but it shows the source, the property, vacant, if it's contiguous with other green space, if it's in the critical area, which watershed it's in, if there's trail or water access. So anyway, this is just a useful tool, and I think it's my intention that we're using this as we pursue this solicitation of new properties. So happy to continue this discussion with specific properties or any other thoughts that we have. But if not, we can set another time to get some feedback from everyone.
Hey, Tom.
Sure.
Or excuse me, I'm sorry, Jack.
Yes.
I think Sally had her hand up first, but
Oh,
we're sort of trying to use this little raise hand, lower hand to.
Oh, sorry, I'm looking at
No,
my
it's all good.
my shared screen. Yeah,
We
Sally,
can
go
just
ahead.
cut in.
Actually, Aaron, I think you were first. You're welcome to go first.
Okay. Well, so Jack, question.
Yeah.
So, I mean, let's just fast forward to outreach for a second.
Yay. Yes, please.
So if we were actually to go solicit these landowners and say, hey, this is what we want to do,
Mhm.
this is why you should do it. You could have these benefits, these XYZ benefits that we lay out. How do you guys envision that? Because my thought is we would just send letters to the property owners. I mean, I don't have yes, there's some bird dogging that you could do to find the owner and find their email address and find their phone number and actually reach out to them and ask them just hey, have you thought of this? But so, how do you guys envision that outreach going? Because I could envision a letter that comes from the Conservancy board. It just says, we've identified your property as a potentially good candidate for conservation. These are the goals of what we do. These are the benefits that you could have. Yeah, property owner information is all public. We could send letters. It probably wouldn't, I'd be happy to pay for the stamps to send them out, but because there's probably not that many. So yeah, just want to talk about outreach and I think we should just kind of go do it.
So it's kind of like a broad stroke approach where, as opposed to picking one of these and trying to pool resources into one single option, we just cast a wide net and see if there's any interest. And then if something bubbles up, then we could pursue that.
Well, I think we take the current list and we qualify it. WNAV is not going to happen. There's certain properties on this list that just aren't, I don't think are realistic. Just because they're valuable for development. They're just someone already owns them, someone's trying to develop them, they're in process. There are other areas that are you can't develop them anyway. They're wetlands or they're near wetlands. No one's going to give you a permit to build there anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the land that's low hanging fruit. So I think we should definitely qualify it a little bit, but and go through the list of properties and it be targeted, but also just go outreach. I don't know. That's
okay. Yeah, that seems, I mean, I like the process-based kind of approach. So maybe either our whole board or we set up, I think we have previously, Linda and I formed a new easement subcommittee, and her and I had met a few times talking about stuff like this. But either we do it as a whole board, or those who are interested in getting on this kind of working subcommittee group could get together and discuss this and try to qualify some of these areas.
or
And
we could split up by ward or whatever. Yeah, I don't,
okay. And then we had talked previously about the kind of this topic, Aaron, of like what are the criteria that we're looking for? So, like in your example here of WNAV, it's developable land, I guess, for the most part. Whereas somewhere
Or
like
or like Brewer Cemetery, like the U.S. government, like not probably realistic.
yeah, you mean here, yeah,
Yeah, the other side behind the police station.
Brewer, yeah. Um,
That side might be approachable, but the other side, yeah, like that's going to be the U.S. government.
right. I actually think the city may own some of this part of this somewhere. But understood. I mean, this is like College Creek coming in. This is really not developable. It's
Right.
all wetland there. So we could say we could have a qualifier of developable, yes or no. And if the answer is it's developable, then we put that into like a lower priority. Um, is that kind of what you're
I mean, you can pick any number of like qualifiers, like what would make something lower priority
Mhm.
or just more unlikely, or even if it's like, yeah, I mean, I'm not saying don't solicit WNAV. I just think that's a waste of time. Like then you know, property's
Right,
worth millions of dollars. Like they're not going to give it to us for free.
right. Okay.
Like,
Um,
quick,
Hey, I had a question. Oh,
yeah,
sorry.
Sally, please go ahead.
no,
Okay.
good, Sally.
Okay. I was wondering, when's the last time this group engaged with folks like Scenic Rivers Land Trust or Crownsville Conservancy, folks that have similar missions and have a lot of experience with selling the idea of a conservation easement? I was wondering if there's ever been an opportunity to collaborate with them, have a sit down, kind of, look at what kind of properties are available and speak about that, let them speak about their experience, and maybe we could learn how to go about doing this outreach in a more effective way just based on what other people are experiencing.
That is really smart. I mean, when Sarah Niebel was the director at Scenic Rivers, we had kind of intermittent conversations about just conservation in the city and um, Scenic Rivers has a little bit different requirements generally for their easements, like size is usually one, unless it's a kind of a special case. But I
Right.
think that's a great idea, Sally, and again, with I think what we talked about at our last meeting was having you as kind of our partnerships and outreach czar. Um,
Uh-huh.
and so I think that any ideas that you have there, and like I think I've said before, we're not going to be able to do everything we want just with this small group of volunteers. So being able to engage with others, either we're taking lessons from them or getting some kind of support from them, whether it's just knowledge transfer or whatever it may be. I think
Well,
that's
we could
really,
sit down and each of us have our own goals and priorities, but we're all looking for willing property owners. And I wonder if there would be a space where, like, I was in a meeting today that's why the thought is coming to me, and we were talking about conservation easements for Anne Arundel County. And Crownsville Conservancy was there, and Scenic Rivers Land Trust was there, and the county was there. And each of us had our own goals, but we were all sitting around talking about the same thing. And it was something where, like, it made me think, what if we had a space that we came together on a more regular basis with these folks, and then they might have the relationships, but it's not attractive to them, but then they let us know about it, and vice versa. I was wondering if that is a potential reality, or if it would be beneficial for me to set up a meeting with all those folks with us.
like almost
Maybe,
like an Annapolis conservation forum.
yeah, something like that where we could all come together, because I know, like, Scenic Rivers Land Trust, they get approached with potential conservation easements a lot, but they can't necessarily take all of them for the reasons you mentioned. Brownsville Conservancy, they really like they'll take projects and sites as low as 2,500 square feet, but they're more in Anne Arundel County. And so
Mhm.
each of them are getting reach outs from homeowners who there might be somebody in the city of Annapolis there that they've been conversing with, but maybe we just all haven't gotten together yet. And forgive me if this has happened in the past and I'm just kind of catching up here.
I
But
don't, not to my knowledge.
okay.
Karen
Yeah.
and Tom may know, but not since I don't think since I've been on the board.
And Sally, the goal of this would be to ask them how to reach out to landowners?
So I was thinking that it would be, yes, we learn how they have found it to be most effective. Like, are they finding that people get offended by letters, or are they finding that people get excited by letters, or do they find that open houses are effective, or door knocking? Like, what are they doing that's working? And then also, I would love to know what they've tried that hasn't worked. And then from there, it would be great if we could come up with some kind of routine, regular dialogue where we are bringing to the table what we know of. And if anybody in that space is interested in saying, yeah, we would want that conservation easement, then we could collaborate. I don't know if there would be any sense of like competition for conservation easements there, or if the goal is to just get the land conserved. But each of us have our own goals, and then the other thing I was thinking of, now that I was just confirming that this grant program isn't in the city yet, but the Anne Arundel County Forestry and Forested Land Grant Program, they cover reforestation, afforestation, and conservation easements. And like we were just with the city today, I was curious if the city would ever entertain putting some funds into that program where the thing that sells the idea of a conservation easement to somebody is we'll put trees on it, and or at least we'll facilitate through the grant getting trees onto the site. Those were just some of my thoughts. Like, how do you sell it? What's working for the folks that do this all the time? And then where can we be collaborating where people are already, like, what if the homeowner doesn't even know that we exist, but they know that Scenic Rivers Land Trust exists, or they know that the Crownsville Conservancy exists, or Spa Creek Conservancy, or another organization that they might be familiar with, but they just didn't quite find us, and we would have been the best fit. So that was those were my thoughts on what the purpose of that relationship would be, is both like initial input on how we do this, and then like a long-term relationship where we can share and trade sites potentially.
Yeah, and Sai, to add to that, I think that's great. And to add to that too, I think you mentioned this, that if there's an interested landowner that's approached a group that they just for one reason or another couldn't take on that particular easement, I don't know that we have any kind of qualifying, like I don't know if we would say no to a smaller easement, or so maybe there's already some interest out there that we're just not aware of, that someone else is aware of.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that would be really cool. And I'd be happy to facilitate setting up something if that's what the group wants me to do. Or I'm happy to hang back and we can do the general, like, send everybody a letter, see what comes back, and then we can have something to actually bring to said meeting. Whatever order makes sense. I'm open to whatever the group thinks here, but I'm happy to do whatever you guys think would be helpful.
I appreciate that, and that's an exciting prospect, I think. I've got Karen hand up and Aaron hand up. Karen, I think your hand's been up for a while. Hi.
Hey, let me put it down now. Um, well, so I guess to answer Sally's question about the last time that we talked to these groups, like, we do have an existing MOU with MET. And I don't know that we've used it in a long time though, or have actively talked to them in a while. But and we have talked to all these groups in the past. Our being in a city is a little bit, like, in some ways we're like more akin to some of like what the Baltimore city groups are trying to do. Like, I think many years ago, a bunch of us went to like a meeting about conservation efforts in Baltimore City, and talked to some people there. But that was like over 10 years ago. But yeah, I mean, I definitely think it's worth like starting that conversation because it's been a long time. I just wanted to answer the question because you were asking like when was the last time that we did that. So that's the answer to that question.
That's helpful. Thank you, Karen. And can I ask a clarifying question?
Yeah.
What is the MOU with, that's Maryland Environmental Trust?
Yeah.
What is that MOU stipulating?
I would have to dig it out to really remember, but had something to do with like I think they might have been holding some easements for us maybe.
Hmm.
I can't remember exactly. I would have to go dig it out and read what it says. Um
Yeah, I'm curious. I don't think that letter is on our shared drive, Karen. If you're able to find a copy of it,
yeah.
that may be helpful to add, stick in our shared drive and just have for reference.
Yeah. Um Tom, I don't know if you remember more about that MOU.
Yeah, Karen, I remember a little bit more, but again, not much. I think it was uh, the challenge comes in, and no matter what effort, invariably uh, a whole 5 second C story. The two things to always remember is nothing happens at all without money, regardless of source, regardless of intention. And two, you've got to have communications. So if the efforts can be directed toward communication between the various areas or funds being, come in to be able to assist, invariably that helps. I think what Sally mentioned actually sounds kind of promising to be able to, if possible, formalize it rather than necessarily coming in, but just coming in to with history, but coming in with, hi, we're all out here doing this, doing similar things in our respective areas. Am I standing in the way of you, one of the other trusts, doing what you would like to do, or is there anything that you can see that we could support or piggyback on, which might be helpful? Because I think that was one of the things that did come out of what you were sharing there, Karen, because of the benefits. It's we're all doing the same thing in essence. We've got all our end goals is where it separates a little bit, but bottom line is we really are all trying to go through the same conservation effort. And I can't help but feel that even during the time that we've been here, that sometimes we kind of get in each other's way. We recently got back with the Severn River Land Trust as they were pushing through, where the church was and what they were cleaning up along that line not that long ago. And when we were supportive, it seemed like things moved very nicely through their realm. When things were problematic, if for nothing else, and running it through our respective alderperson, there was, okay, fine, here's what's going on, here's what we're doing as a board. And just to let you know, in case one of your constituents says, hey, we've got a problem, or what the heck is going on, you'll be aware and you'll have a source to get the information there. But yes to what Sally is saying, just a little bit, like I said, more to to what you, I think, had done with the meeting with the city back up in Baltimore about 10 years.
Yeah. Yeah, and it was in the city, but just to clarify, it wasn't with the city government. It was like with different nonprofits working
Right,
on
right,
land use stuff. Of course, they have different, like it was, I do recall that like some of it was that they had a lot of abandoned properties, which of course we don't have. So in some ways it was like about like reclaiming the abandoned properties. So but the other thing I wanted to say was just a reminder that a lot, like pretty much all of our existing easements, or a large percentage of them, have come into being through the development process. So I wouldn't rule out developable parcels. In fact, that's exactly why we have them tagged, is because we want to make sure that we keep an eye on them so that we don't lose that land
right,
as to move forward. That we want to make sure that the city's aware that this is a um, targeted conservation area, so that if a development does come up before the city, that they're, because they can negotiate with the developer to like at least set aside some of it for easement. So those are things that we want to keep an eye out. And also I know that like when the state of Maryland was developing their green infrastructure program, that they pretty much focused on developable parcels, because things like wetlands and floodplains can't be developed anyway. So if you have a certain amount of money that you're trying to spend on conserving land, you actually get more bang for your buck if you focus on the parcels that are at risk of being lost to development.
Absolutely.
So just another thing to kind of keep in mind when we're looking at these. I know that they're harder, but um,
That's good context, Karen. And I had mentioned I think a lot of the existing easements came through as a result of development and not of, this group being so proactive and finding willing landowners. So I think, yeah, that's helpful context. Which actually may be a good segue. I'm not trying to move us off of this discussion, but it may be a good segue to continue on our agenda. Because I think there's a new easement. I want to ask Dylan, but is there any more discussion here? I don't want to leave anybody hanging if they have additional points or thoughts.
I'll just say I don't think we're going to get anybody to. Yeah, I mean, I think we need to solicit and we need to ask people. Like they're not going to give it to us if we don't ask them. That's just my
Profound,
stance.
profound. I agree, Aaron. So I think like taking like what I'm hearing is taking a more proactive stance as opposed to just sitting around waiting for something to happen.
Yeah, and I mean, I was going to ask you, Jack. I mean, you're at Greenvest. You guys are trying to find landowners all the time. How do you guys do it?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of different ways. I think the easiest way is sending someone a letter using whatever public record information you can find.
That's how I do it.
Yeah.
It has to be handwritten, or they're not going to open it. And it's got to tell them what they need to know. And tantalizing that there might be compensation would be helpful in the letter. It would be easier probably to ask the city for funding if you actually had a property that was kind of ready to go. Like asking the city for like a pot of money is like probably not going to be very useful. But if you said, hey, here's this landowner, here's where we've landed on a price, like, is this something you guys think is worth it? I don't know exactly how all that works, but
Yeah, usually I think generally at least from what I understand, is that we have a time when the budget's going in each year to kind of request funding for the Conservancy Board. And maybe there could be some interim request, but from what I understand, if we were looking for funding for something and this came up with the data gaps and figuring out easement boundaries, getting money for survey has come up in the past. And it sounded like the time to do that was when the budget's getting pulled together. And maybe there's another time to do it as well, but that was my understanding.
there's always Project Open Space money that comes up available occasionally too. So
That's a good point. Although I
don't know what the timing of that one is.
think the open space, just the state of Maryland's budget, I think they paused some POS funding for the next couple of years, but I don't know if there's existing funding that wasn't affected. Okay, well, I really like all of that. And Sally, whether it's like the interface, or Aaron, whether it's like the engagement with landowners, Karen going after, not just targeting floodplains and wetlands, but looking at developable land and parts of that could be conserved. I think this is all really good discussion, which I think is a good segue into administer and managing said properties. I heard that there's a new development called Parole Place. I'm not really familiar with it, but I think there's a new easement proposed for that as well. And I don't know if anybody else on the board had any insight here, or Dylan, if you knew about Parole Place development. But I think it's somewhere, it's behind Sinfron Terrace. So kind of this area here. I don't know if it's this whole thing. This seems like a very large area, but I heard
there's tons of invasives back there.
Yeah, this is
Crazy.
like a big gully. I've been back here once a while ago. It's like a big, steep, like stream channel that just conveys a ton of stormwater, and it wasn't designed for that much stormwater, so it's really an incised, eroded channel through here. And then there's like kudzu, or just I think it's just a big mat of invasives back through here. So I'd like to get some more information on that. And Dylan, if we can reach out to, maybe I should reach out to Jessica with the Office of Law and request any information on that. But it would be good for us to be kind of kept in the fray with any new easements coming up.
Yeah,
I
definitely.
know there was a development back there. I thought it had been already built, but maybe it's just getting built now. But there was like a development back in that area a few years ago that had an easement on it that we were shown the proposed easement area.
So here's May 31st of last year, so about a year old. Parole Place SMPD application includes planned development uses for multifamily dwellings, townhomes, commercial. So I have not had time. Well, this looks like a good document to dig into. I have not had time to really look into this much more, but it sounds like I should take an action to reach out to the Office of Law and request any information on a potential forthcoming conservation easement here.
Yeah, I think law and also DPZ. If you want to CC me, yeah, we can all try to get that info together for you. Of
Okay, thanks, Dylan.
course.
The existing soils and represented restrictions, soils which are hydric or highly erodible are protected within a conservation easement. Compliance with forest conservation. Okay, yeah, so I'll follow up and so Dylan, do you know who I mean, I can copy Jessica or I can send the email to Jessica. Do you know who I should reach out to at planning department?
I think Mike Meekins would probably be the correct contact. If you don't have his email, I can relay that to you.
Okay, yeah, that would be really helpful.
Yeah.
Cool. Just want to make sure that we know, where our easements are and if something's coming up. I mean, if this one's already been contemplated and is kind of finalized, then that is what it is, and we'll happily take on the responsibility of adding it to the portfolio and stewarding it. But for new developments, having some role in the conservation aspect, I think would be good for us. Okay, so I will follow up for Parole Place. Let me just make a quick. Our data gaps. Patrick, thank you for being here. I don't think we need to have a protracted discussion on data gaps. I've just left it on the agenda because I know that we've spent considerable time looking at where we're missing information. And Dylan, I know that you had mentioned, and I think Mr. Lyles had mentioned that the city was looking at some of the data gaps and trying to track down some of this information. So I don't know if there's next steps to discuss there. But this is where we had talked about getting some budget for things like survey. If we didn't have an existing survey record for the conservation easements and just having consistency with having all the documents associated with each easement.
Yeah, we're continuing on with phase one of the easement rectification with our contractor McCrone. It seems like we'll have a decent bit of budget left over to not only, tackle the data gaps of our known easements, but also start to track down those easements which we actually just flat out might not be aware of, right? You don't know what you don't know. But that work, we haven't gotten an exact estimate as to, how that's gonna cost us. So I can't say yet as to exactly, how much is in the pot and how much we need. But I can provide, more updates on that later, or we can put in the request now and, just kind of adjust it as we go on. I think the latter approach would probably be better for, our means.
Okay. Yeah, that's actually really helpful. And kudos to the city for taking that initiative to engage with Crone and kind of start this process. I think this had come up for a while since I've been on the board of, where are we missing information? So I think that sounds all positive. Anybody else want to discuss data gaps or have any questions? Uh, Gardens of Annapolis, I've just left this on here. I think this probably could almost be a sub bullet under the data gaps because this is kind of a special case where, to my knowledge, we don't actually have it's shown as an existing easement, but it's not actually recorded, is my understanding. That's right here off of Edgewood Road behind the Giant.
Yeah, as of right now, we don't really have like any um, deed or plat that shows that it is a legitimate easement. However, we do have some planning approval documents and an as-built that do demonstrate that there should be an easement there.
Okay.
And so it's, that's one of those that, McCrone is gonna have to spend a little bit more time on. So we're not quite there yet on that. Um, so we'll kind of have to play by ear on that one. There might be some standing already based on the documentation that we have that there should be a legitimate easement there. But it's still, and it's taking a little bit longer than I had hoped, but it's still TBD.
Okay. Thanks, Dylan. And I do remember, I think we had in the past, we had some pretty limited brief communication with, I think, the property manager there, who also, I think, was under the impression that it was a conservation area. So I guess for now we'll just we'll let the contractor continue their scope of work. And if there's any way that we can participate or support that, I think we'd be interested and happy to help. All right. The Thomas Woods. So this is another new-ish easement. I'm not sure if it's made its way onto this map yet. It is located right here. Or it's one of these two. It's right off of Forest Drive, right before you get to the hardware store and the Shell and Exxon gas stations at the Hillsmere Bay Ridge Ave light. There's a new development called Thomas Woods. It looks like it's been constructed now. And so there are, I think, 3 small discrete conservation areas as part of that development. And so that should get then added into our portfolio of easement areas to monitor and steward. I don't think anyone from this board has been out there yet. Patrick and I visited when it was at the very early stages of construction and just realized that, one, it was private property. We weren't going to walk on the construction site. And 2, there was no way to tell where the easement areas were because nothing was built yet. So Patrick, it might be about that time to get back out there. As far as accessing the easement, and Dylan, I'm not necessarily expecting you to have the answer, but there's some areas like the Chesapeake Children's Museum where there's an easement, or Kingsport, where I think it's pretty known that Conservancy board members have gone there to inspect easements. But for something like this, where it's a new development and residents there might not be aware that there's a conservation easement at all, and maybe this is an Office of Law question, but how would we go about inspecting that easement where we haven't communicated with the landowner, we haven't been there before? Yeah, I'm just kind of curious how that works.
Yeah. I've talked with Office of Law about this before. It kind of goes into like legitimacy of an agent of the city, and providing notice. I think functionally it would be the same as any other. But yeah, I mean, I suppose it wouldn't hurt to be prudent and just reach out to Office of Law and clarify that.
Yeah, and I'm sure everyone there are reasonable, rational, nice people, but I've seen like way too many news articles about people like brandishing a weapon when you come onto their property if you were turning around because you're lost or something, and just making sure that we're taking reasonable steps to notify and make sure. So it sounds like, Dylan, maybe an action for me to take there is reach out to Office of Law and ask that question, and I'll copy you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. All right. So easement inspections. So for our newer board members, I don't think we've been through this process yet, but we're really supposed to be inspecting our easements. We've kind of set a goal of doing this on an annual basis. The email that I sent out recently had a doodle poll, and I've seen that a few people have responded. So thanks to those folks who have responded. But I'd like to get as many of us, if we can get all of us together, that would be great. If we can get most of us together, I think that's maybe kind of the reality, to at least do like walk an easement and do an inspection together. And then while we're out there, kind of talk about the process and if we want to make tweaks to it, and what works, what doesn't work. So I would like to get that scheduled in the next week. So if you have not had a chance to respond to the availability poll yet, I would please ask that you just pop in your availability there, and we'll I think I just put it down for an hour, so it's not a huge time commitment. But then we can get out on an easement together and go through this process so that we're kind of all going to be consistent with how we inspect our easements. And then the follow-up step to that would be making any adjustments to the process and then assigning which easements will be inspected by which board members. So happy to discuss anything there.
Hey, Jack, I don't think I got the doodle poll. When did you send that?
You didn't get the doodle poll.
Yeah, I don't think I did either, Jack.
I sent it Tuesday, a whopping 48 hours ago. It was an email with the agenda attached, and then I provided the map the
Okay.
link to the map we were looking at. And
Yeah,
also,
yeah. Okay, I see. Sorry, I
sorry,
was looking for
it was
something
kind of
separate.
it was kind of yeah, it was kind of lumped together with a bunch of other stuff.
Okay.
I apologize for that.
Gotcha. I got it then.
Yeah. So yeah, I just think that would be we did that before, Karen, when I first joined the board. I think we did one of these within like a month or two of me joining, and it was really helpful, just to get some background on how we do the inspections, and also it was nice to just see everybody in person and be able to connect that way. So I'd like to do that in the next, I think I went like out a month or so. So when you get around to it, if you could do your availability, that would be great, and we'll get that done. Save Our Trees. So Sally, this is another area. I don't know if you're familiar with the Save Our Trees folks. They're pretty,
Yep.
yeah, they're pretty ubiquitous around the city. I think they just did a recent event at Truxton Park, removing some invasives. But we've worked together in the past on a couple of invasive removal events, and I think it would be great to continue to nurture that relationship with them. And basically, they're providing volunteers to help maintain easements. So I think it's really in our best interest to continue to coordinate with them. So Sally, if you're okay with it, I would like to I'm sure you know them, but to just kind of introduce you to Save Our Trees as a representative of the Conservancy Board, and then you and I can work together with them on getting some other events on the schedule. Or I think they've even talked about bringing in like professional resources if they've realized that a certain area has more invasives than they can just deal with volunteers. So they
Yeah.
kind of had mentioned that. So
That would be fantastic. And then I see also with Maryland Reentry, does Save Our Trees and Maryland Reentry collaborate much on that? Or are are those separate partnerships?
That's a great question, but actually, I have some other. I have actually bring up a really good point. I just got an email this afternoon about Maryland Reentry, and kind of reignited that priority of connecting and working with them for our shared goals. I'm not sure if Save Our Trees and Maryland Reentry work together.
They have common connection. Diane Butler, who's also on the Annapolis Environment Board, she works with both.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Aaron. Yeah, she actually, I think, is the one who gave us this heads up email today that Maryland Reentry was awarded a mini grant, Chesapeake Bay Trust mini grant award. So Devin with Maryland Reentry has been awarded a mini grant, and so I think they're interested in I haven't had time to digest the whole email, but basically Diane reached out to the Conservancy board and said, we've been awarded this small mini grant and let's, can we work together on implementing those funds for invasive removal, I think so. So yeah, so Sally, that would be great. So I'm gonna connect Sally with Save Our Trees. And Sally, I'm not expecting you to unilaterally be managing these relationships, but I think just having another point of contact would be really helpful.
I'm more than happy to take on however much of that relationship you want me to take on. I'm very familiar with both of these organizations and love working with them. And if I can represent the Conservancy board in that relationship, that's totally cool with me.
Thanks, Sally. Rock star. Uh, okay. So I think this is going to get a little bit redundant here. Encouraging the preservation of environmentally sensitive land, pilot new easement initiative. I think we had a really good, healthy discussion on that at the beginning of our meeting. And then partnerships, I think we've also just kind of covered. I had a couple groups on here, just ones that were kind of top of mind that we've talked to recently. So MDRC, Save Our Trees. Also, the Severn River Association is a partner group in the Whole Watershed Act, which the Severn River was selected as one of the 5 watersheds in Maryland that are going to receive basically at a high level special attention and match funding for a variety of different kind of projects. So and I think Severn River Association, Sally, aren't they doing a sort of bioretention right near your neighborhood in
Yeah,
Annapolis?
yeah, right by the Giant. They're going to be
Yeah.
there. And then they're also back at Georgetown East doing work back there as well.
Yeah, so I don't know if there's I'd have to talk, I'd have to reach out to Jesse or Ben at Severn River Association and see if there's any sort of conservation aspect to those projects. I mean, I know they're not huge areas of land, but there's plantings associated with bioretention, which I think these 2 projects are. And so I don't know who's responsible or if anyone's responsible for maintaining the vegetation and, so on and so forth. But there may be an opportunity to work with some river association and our kind of shared goals there too. So just
Yeah,
another group. And I know there are a lot more groups. There's Spot Creek Conservancy. Sally, you brought up Scenic Rivers Land Trust, Crownsville Conservancy. There's just a litany of groups, and it's kind of my vision that we all find some common ground, and we're going to be able to look to go a lot farther if we're working together, especially because we're all volunteer.
mhm.
I'm happy to talk more about partnerships there, but I really just have this on here just to continue the conversation. And if anyone has any other partnerships with groups they think may be helpful, I'd be all ears. Uh, Further implementing goals for improving water quality. Again, I think we've talked about this, identifying easements to support water quality goals. Again, here the Severn River Association got a grant and they evaluated the entire Severn River, which included Annapolis, parts of Severn River in Annapolis. And Weems Creek came out as their #1 priority, with Spa Creek and Back Creek, I think also in the top 10. There were like 107 or something sub-watersheds that were evaluated. So to have at least 3 of those sub-watersheds in the top 10 of, in need of restoration or high impact restoration, I think speaks to the opportunities that we have as a board for conservation and improving water quality. So I'm not really expecting us as a board to be taking on water quality improvement projects, but I think facilitating that is part of our mission here. So I don't know if anyone's familiar with any restoration proposed in Weems Creek, but that's the top priority for the Severn River Action Plan, and then the Whole Watershed Act as well. I think for now the Conservancy Board was listed as a kind of partner group, of which there are a lot in the Whole Watershed Act, but the city is a big one, the county is a big one, and the Resilience Authority, I think, was the kind of project sponsor for the Whole Watershed Act.
Yeah, yeah, they were the applicant.
Applicant. There you go. Thank you.
Mhm.
And then providing for the development of additional recreational resources of the city. Um, we don't have someone from the Office of Law on this evening. And again, Dylan, I'm sorry to ask you, and it's totally fine if there's not an update on your end, but I know we talked about the Kingsport easement with the Office of Law at our last meeting, so I was just curious to if there's any updates there for the Conservancy board, but
Yeah, that's been more of a Jackie and Office of Law project, so I don't have that much information for you.
okay, thanks. Yeah, that's kind of what I figured. And then the Hawkins Cove Truxton Connector Trail. Dylan, this is where we had provided a letter of support, I believe. And
Mhm.
just curious if there's any movement there or anything that we can support with the development of that project and that trail.
Yeah, great news. I'm not sure if I had this news last meeting, but we got the funding. Not full funding, but I believe I'm just shy of it. I think the request was 450, and I think we got 400, maybe 430. Um, Double check on that. But yeah, the project should be moving forward as planned. Um, I don't believe, we've really gone past, that award period quite yet, but I think we'll do some outreach and civic engagement and some planning and design and get that moving forward. So, I'll make sure to engage you guys when it comes time for it. As I'm sure you're just as interested now as you were back then. But yeah, I'm excited about it. Everyone's pretty jazzed that we got that funding, especially with the current federal climate. So
Seriously.
yeah, yeah.
Awesome, Dylan. Well, congratulations to the city. And I know that I'm sure you put in a lot of work on getting that application in, and that's great news. I'm curious, are there any existing I don't know if I have any like existing materials on kind of what the project was other than the name of it, and maybe we had some emails
Yeah, I
back
think I
and
gave you
forth.
like a map or two. But yeah, I can probably send you the full proposal and the application.
Okay, yeah, I have your email here from this was back in October, and I've got the map. So actually, I'm gonna go ahead and add this map to our drive.
This connection has been like on the Conservancy board's interest and agenda for like 20 years. So I'm so excited to see it coming to fruition. It's really awesome. So thanks a lot, Dylan, and to you and the rest of the city for
Yeah,
moving
it's
it
A
forward.
big team effort.
huge. And also that's on, that area is part of, where am I? Is part of this potential easements.
Mhm.
Looks like it cuts like right through here. Um, so I think there's some overlap there.
What's the funding going to fund?
It basically provides a proper and accessible trail between, those neighborhoods and Truxton Park and Hawkins Cove.
Yeah, is it like a awesome? Is it like a 10-foot paved path or like just more trail maintenance funding?
I
Oh,
don't
there it
believe we'll
is. Oh,
do
there we go.
paved. I just think it'll be, reinforced. There'll be, proper construction, whether it be a boardwalk, XYZ where necessary. Just so, it's a clearly marked trail, a safe trail, and an accessible trail for everyone in the community.
Cool. Thanks.
Mhm.
So Jack, just to clarify, that forested area is the area that we had thought like it's actually owned, it's city owned, but we have been monitoring it as an easement for decades. And it's we are interested in putting an easement on it. The city asked us to wait until this project was done so that it didn't interfere with anything they wanted to do. But there should be an easement coming to formalize that city parcel as an with
Yeah,
an
that is
easement.
currently part of the scope of work with our contractor for, you know, establishing whether or not it's already an easement. Um, so yeah, more information to come on that.
Cool. And then, and Karen, I know we've talked before about the city, like holding an easement on your own property or something like, I don't know all the inner workings of that necessarily, but
I think
that
that
sounds
might
like,
be what that MET MOU is about.
okay.
But I'm not 100% sure. I'll have to dig it out.
Okay, cool. Great. Well, that's great news. We're ending on a high note there.
Good team.
And then under updates and new business, I did have a note from our wonderful board member, Linda, who's not able to be here tonight. It sounds like she is not intending to renew her term, which I think runs out in June. So I just wanted to let everyone know that Linda will be kind of cycling off of the board, it sounds like, and I would love any referrals for other, prospective board members so we can try to keep a full board. I think with everyone being volunteer, it's good to try to keep a full board so we can spread out any work that we're trying to accomplish.
And I mentioned to Jack already, but I think my term might have expired already.
Yeah, so that I think, yeah, we need to follow up. I think it's Hillary.
Dylan, do you know, is Hillary Raftovich still the
Yes.
liaison for that? Okay.
So I know at some point we had on here, yes, 7 members. At some point on here, a member roster. Karen, Thomas, Linda. Yeah, so we've got everyone on here. So
What does it
Karen,
say? What?
right, June 30th, 2024. You've gone rogue for almost a year
What am
now.
I doing here?
And Tom, looks like Tom as well.
Yeah, it's kind of like I have no way to find myself off here right now.
So, okay, so for Tom and Karen.
Yeah, Jack, one of the things to recommend too is I think it probably couldn't hurt to drop that note saying, oh my gosh, we've got a representative, Mr. Miss Alderperson, about, somebody from your ward. Would be nice to be able to have somebody recommend. If you have anybody to assist, that would be great. And kind of like dump it onto the council and see whether or not they have somebody. That way, at least they've got, confidence that their constituency representative.
Yeah, that's a good point, Tom, because on here we've got our wards, and I actually think that it's not. I don't think Linda's in Ward 8 any longer, and Sally, I think you're now with me in Ward 7. So trying to make sure that we've got kind of representation from across the city, I think would a geographic coverage would also be good.
It couldn't hurt to at least have somebody out, look for representative within their own wards and saying, hey, this person should do a good job for you.
Right. Okay, well, I'll take this time to open the floor for any new business or comments, but that is the end of our agenda for this evening. Not hearing any? We need to make a motion to end our meeting.
I'll move to adjourn.
Do I have a second?
I second.
Sally has seconded. The motion on the floor is adjourning our meeting at 6:42 p.m. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thanks, everybody. Really appreciate it. Dylan, thank you. Awesome.